Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Just want to welcome everyone and thank you for attending this meeting. We're here to discuss the grant solicitation for community outreach related to the California Satellite Methane Project. I'm Elizabeth Shealy. I am Chief of the Research Division where this project is located. We're really looking forward to hearing everyone's ideas for the grant solicitation and hope we have a productive discussion. There will be ways to share additional feedback after the workshop, and we'll share those more at the end, more details at the end of the discussion. Again, just want to thank everybody. Look forward to this discussion and appreciate you spending your Thursday evening with us. Now I will hand it over to the interpreter for interpretation and instructions. Thank you.
Bueno, muy bien, pues entonces vamos a empezar. Quisiera nada más darle la bienvenida a todos y todas. Gracias por participar en esta reunión. Estamos aquí para platicar sobre el proyecto satélite de metano de California con respecto al desarrollo de la solicitud de subvención. Esto en cuanto al alcance comunitario. Yo soy Elizabeth Shilley y yo soy jefa de la división de investigación en donde se ubica este proyecto. Y bueno, buscamos poder escuchar las ideas de todos y todas y que también puedan seguir compartiendo su retroalimentación después del taller. Vamos a estar compartiendo un poco más de detalles una vez que hayamos terminado y muchísimas gracias a todos. Buscamos obtener también su retroalimentación y apreciamos mucho que estén pasando con nosotros esta noche de jueves. Con respecto a las instrucciones del sistema de interpretación hacia el español, en el icono que aparece como un globo terráqueo en la parte inferior de su pantalla, pueden seleccionar el idioma español y también está la opción de silenciar audio original en caso de que nada más quiera escuchar la voz del intérprete. Si no encuentra el globo terráqueo, que va a aparecer en unos momentos, puede darle clic en donde dice más, aparecen como 3 puntos y ahí va a encontrar la función de interpretación hacia el español. Gracias and thank you.
Next slide. Before we dive into the workshop presentation, I'll cover some logistics. First, I'll note that this workshop is being recorded. Interpretation services will be provided today in Spanish. There will be a button labeled interpretation on the Zoom screen. If it is not readily available, click more to show this option. When it appears, click on that interpretation button and select the language you'd like to hear the meeting in. To hear the interpreted language only, click mute original audio. We have also dropped a link to the workshop presentation in Spanish in the chat. Now we'll hear a message from our interpreters about interpretation services.
Este taller está siendo grabado y, como mencionaba anteriormente, se están prestando servicios de interpretación hacia el español. Se va a habilitar la función de interpretación y va a aparecer como se ve en pantalla con un globo terráqueo en la parte inferior del menú de Zoom. Una vez que esté disponible, puede dar clic en el globo terráqueo y seleccionar su opción, y también está la opción de silenciar el audio original.
Next slide. Okay, throughout the workshop today, we invite you to submit your written questions using the Zoom Q&A feature. We recommend taking a moment to ensure your participant name on Zoom is your preferred name. This will help us call on you during the live Q&A. You're welcome to add your organization to your name as well. Later on in the meeting, we'll also invite those interested in making a verbal comment to use the raise hand feature. If you're joining on the phone, dial *9 to raise and lower your hand. Bobby and Steve will help facilitate today's Q&A sessions and let you know when it's your turn to speak. Next slide. If you have any technical issues, please contact Roberta Rouge by email at roberta.rouge@arb.ca.gov. Next slide. Okay, so now that we have gone over logistics, we can get started with our meeting. My name is Valerie Carranza. I'm an air pollution specialist in the research division at CARB. And I will start off today's meeting with this short presentation to ensure that everyone starts on the same page. After this presentation, we'll have a facilitated discussion about the community engagement grant. This is a chance for you to share your ideas for the grant, and you're also welcome to submit any written questions or suggestions. Contact information is listed on our website and will be shared at the end of the discussion. Next slide. Methane is a powerful greenhouse gas. and the second largest contributor to climate change globally, after carbon dioxide. It traps heat more effectively than carbon dioxide, 25 times more over 100 years. Methane does not present a direct health concern for people, but other substances may be present along with methane. Those co-pollutants may have health impacts. These potential co-pollutants likely vary by source, and more work needs to be done to determine which co-pollutants are present in different methane sources. Some of the major areas methane can be released in amounts that can be seen by satellite are by oil and gas infrastructure, landfills, and dairies. Next slide. Over the past decade, CARB's research has shown that a new class of remote sensing technology, known as methane plume imagers, can detect emissions from large, discrete sources of methane, such as an oil well or gas collection infrastructure on a landfill. This technology helps detect methane emissions and can support actions to reduce or stop methane leaks. CARB's research program funded multiple airborne studies, which were successful, large-scale demonstrations of the technology. Armed with lessons learned from these research studies, California is now among the first in the world to embrace satellite-based methane plume imagers. This innovation allows for faster identification, more frequent observations, and more complete coverage of methane sources around the state. This supports California's climate goals by helping discover and ultimately repair methane leaks more quickly. Conventional aerial methane surveys have observed relatively small areas, while the satellite in this project can view much larger areas due to the ability to make daily observations. The California Satellite Methane Project, or CalSMP, is a new project applying what was learned in previous studies to new data acquired from satellites. CalSMP will provide CARB with regular images of methane plumes rather than a one-time snapshot. That is because the satellite can pass over the plume with each orbit. The continuous orbit can help CARB determine the size of the leak, work with industry to stop the leak, and verify that the leak is gone. Next slide, please. Methane gas absorbs specific wavelengths of light, leaving a unique signature in the light. These wavelengths of light are measured by methane plume imagers to determine where there are higher concentrations of methane. The data is then processed into plume images. Methane plume imagers have high spatial resolution, meaning they produce detailed images compared to other methane detecting satellites. However, plume imagers can only detect methane when there are high methane concentrations in small areas. Along with images of methane plumes, commercial plume imaging satellites are frequently used to estimate where methane plumes comes from and the emissions rate when the plume image was taken. Methane plume imagers are best for detecting methane emissions from individual sources, frequent observations of large methane sources, and the ability to cover large areas. Methane plume imagers are not the best tool for detecting widespread sources of emissions or small point sources. They also do not work when it is cloudy or under some other atmospheric conditions, which can lead to gaps in data. Next slide. The project provides data that has been integrated into the oil and gas methane regulation and is being considered for other sectors such as landfills and dairies. When a methane plume is detected by a plume imaging sensor and reported to CARB, the agency evaluates available geospatial data to determine the likely source of the emissions. For oil and gas plumes, CARB works with the operator to understand if there are any violations of its oil and gas regulation and how to mitigate the leak. For plumes in other sectors, CARB notifies the operator to request information about the cost of the leak and asks the operator to mitigate it if possible. Next slide. Details of all detected plumes, including their status and any corrective actions taken, are made public 30 days after detection. Satellites may be used for follow-up observations to verify leak repairs. Combined, the satellite data and operator responses may highlight recurring problems from individual sources or more broadly from sectors. A small portion of these plumes may be found close to populated areas. These plumes will be prioritized for notification and mitigation procedures. CARB is currently working with air districts and other regulatory partners to refine our procedures for dealing with these plumes quickly. Based on prior studies, less than 1% of plumes may be close to communities. Next slide. CalSMP provides CARB with regular images of methane plumes instead of a one-time snapshot. This is because the satellite can pass over the plume with each orbit. The continuous orbit can help CARB determine the size of the leak and work to stop the leak with the operator and take any other follow-up actions. The project will target certain areas for observation. The targeted areas will be places where large emissions of methane are likely to occur. These include landfills, oil and gas operations, and dairies. The map on the right that you see here shows a draft of the initial areas CARB may target for observation. The frequency and extent of coverage is expected to increase as the project matures and more satellites are used for observation. Next slide. As part of the funding allocated by the California state budget for purchasing satellite data, $5 million was provided in the state budget to support engagement in communities related to the upcoming satellite methane project. This was in response to a letter sent by CBOs to CARB, emphasizing the importance of funding for community engagement efforts related to satellite methane observations and ensuring community access to this data. A competitive grant solicitation will be released by CARB in the coming months in order to begin the process of distributing this grant funding. We are seeking feedback on some elements of the grant solicitation in today's discussion. There are other aspects of the grant that we cannot change. Those include total funding and the length of the contract. Next slide. The goal of the grant is to fund community outreach efforts to ensure these data are accessible, understandable, and useful to communities. We hope the grant will result in resources that can be used by CARB and CBOs to help community members in California and beyond learn about methane and satellite measurements of methane. Those resources may include videos, pamphlets, posters, or other products the grantees develop. The grant will also help develop lines of communication between CARB, CBOs, and community members so that everyone is aware when methane plumes are found in their area and understand what risk level may be associated with the plume. Next slide. Currently, we're planning to have the grant managed by a third-party administrator. The third-party administrator will be responsible for awarding subgrants and working with CBOs to develop the community engagement plan. They would also work with CBOs and communities to provide CARB with recommendations on protocols to inform communities when methane leaks are found. The third-party administrator and the CBO subgrantees will be responsible for developing training materials and holding regular community meetings. In the upcoming discussion, we're hoping to hear what you think about the structure for the grant and grantees, as well as what training materials you're hoping to see develop. Next slide. We will shortly split into breakout rooms to discuss the grant solicitation. We are looking for your feedback on several aspects of the solicitation, including the third-party administrator or administrators, the CBO subgrantees, the community engagement plan, training materials, and final deliverables. In each breakout room, there will be a facilitator who will walk through the topics and ask the group specific questions. There will also be a note taker to ensure we capture all the ideas presented in the breakout room. Okay. Before we split into breakout rooms, though, we do have time for a few questions. If you have questions, please raise your hand or submit your questions through the Q&A box. You can also submit any additional feedback or suggestions by May 23, 2025. If your organization would like to have an independent discussion with CARB about the grant solicitation, please reach out and we will schedule that meeting. All feedback and requests should be submitted to calsmp@arb.ca.gov. Okay, we will now open it up for questions.
All right, so during the presentation, it looks like a few questions came in and I can answer those right now. So the first question is, at what concentration does the methane plume become visible? And the answer is a little bit complicated. In general, the satellites don't tell you the concentration of methane at the ground. The measurement doesn't quite work that way, but if a leak is larger than around 100 kilograms of methane per hour, it's generally going to be visible by the satellites. So it's a little bit different than how we think about measurements traditionally in terms of like concentration and in parts per million. A second question that we got during the presentation is, if it's not possible to mitigate a leak, what steps will CARB take to stop the leak? In general, if we find a leak and someone tells us that they're unable to fix it, we will continue to make observations of it with the satellites in the future. And we'll also work with our regulatory and enforcement partners to help ensure that this leak can be dealt with if possible. Another question that we got asks about if this is a duplicative effort, since the US EPA is already covering California via the super emitter program. And so this project is a little bit different than the super emitter program. The super emitter program it doesn't purchase data. It's a pathway by which companies can collect measurements of plumes and submit them to the US EPA, whereas this project that we have is a direct pathway to purchase the data and use it directly by us.
Okay, and then I can help coordinate some of the questions that might be coming in through those raising their hands. So Zoom should order it in the order that the question, the hand was raised. So it looks like we have our first question here from Caesar A. So you are being unmuted, and if you would like to proceed with speaking.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for answering those questions. I wanted to know a little bit more details on whether the CBOs or the awardees of the grant are the ones that are going to help develop a community notification, and if that community notification is going to be specific to each of the areas to which those awardees work, or if there will be a statewide notification that folks can sign up for that is going to come out of this.
I can take an answer for this one. That's actually feedback that we're hoping to get from this solicitation. In terms of outreach to the public and to communities, that's all fair game to talk about in the solicitation. So we don't really have a proposed mechanism for that yet, and happy to hear about it.
And I currently don't see any other raised hands. I'll also remind you, if you don't have a chance to ask a question here on the slide here, we have other mechanisms to be able to provide questions, and we'll also have the breakout rooms. I do see another hand raised here, which would be Gus Aguirre Jr. You're being unmuted if you'd like to proceed.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Gustavo Aguirre Jr. Here in the Bakersfield region. I'm not sure on which slide it covered it, but it stated that the solicitation might be dealt through a third party. Have those third parties been identified? Are they like research institutions, other BDOs within EPA? I'd like to hear more information about that.
Hey, Gustavo, great question. We don't have a pre-selected third-party administrator for this, and that's someone we'll be choosing through the solicitation process. And in the workshop today, one thing we're hoping to get is feedback on what that selection should look like. So we're hoping to hear from you about how we can best choose a third-party administrator for this project.
I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Did we want to go to breakout rooms a bit early or wait till 6?
Breakout rooms are ready,
Yes.
so we can go.
Yeah, if there are no other questions, we can move on to the next slide, just to provide with more information. Okay. Okay, so thanks everyone for your questions. You will now be randomly assigned to a breakout room for about an hour or so. If you need a breakout room conducted in Spanish or able to participate in a Spanish breakout room, click Not Now when invited to join a breakout room. For English, choose Join. Each group will have a facilitator and a note taker. After the discussions, we will return to the main room around 7 p.m. and hear the highlights of discussion from each room. Okay.
Before we break out, there was one more question that came in the Q&A that's showing a slide again with the scope of work.
Okay.
Which slide was that?
It might be about the grant. Maybe that one. Or the next one. I'm not too sure.
The next one has community grant goals, which may be closer to scope.
And I believe these can also be found on our webpage. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
We can provide a link in the chat.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I will open the breakout rooms. If you wish to stay in a Spanish language breakout room, please click Not Now. Otherwise, you can click Join.
Hey, I think everyone is back now from their breakout rooms. Okay. I hope everyone had a fruitful discussion and were able to share their thoughts about the community engagement grant. Okay, so we have a bit of time. So I'll call on each room to briefly share the highlight of their discussion. I'm not sure if someone already is designated from their room, or if you could volunteer, that'd be great. And if you could just share some highlights of your discussion with the rest of the group, that'd be great. Okay, so can someone from the main room or the bilingual room start us off?
Caesar, do you want to highlight some of the biggest things that we mentioned in our room, or either I could do it or Isis?
Yeah, I'll switch over to English. Yeah, I think we had a good discussion as to what the role of the administrator could be and how to best increase public participation in these meetings. We did note that each community is different and that there's going to have to be different approaches, but that the opportunities should be the same in each of these communities when it comes to access to data, access to reports, access to information, and to make sure that that information is given in a simple and easy to understand manner, but also to make sure that that information is spread across different forms of communication like social media, local radio and TV, and also to have that simple, easy to understand, easy to access information on the website, but also have the more in the weeds and complicated information on the website as well for those who are interested and are able to understand some of the more complicated parts of this.
Thank you for sharing, Cessa. Okay, so we can move on to room 1. Someone would like to share?
Yeah, I'll do my best to summarize. We had a lot of great talking. So one point that sort of came up in several questions was how large the state of California is and how the disjunct between the best people to actually engage are always the ones closest to the community. And there's differences from community to community. It could be a church in one place. It could be schools. It could be and that the smaller the organization, the less organizational, the less they're equipped to take on all of the deadline requirements and other kinds of things. And so there's even room possibly for a tiered structure in between where the state's so huge that you could have regional or slightly smaller kind of umbrella type groups that can nonetheless be well enough networked with the CBOs locally that they can kind of get the administration piece of it, but also keep everyone on task. There's also a lot of talk about how you really need to have a lot of goals set right at the start, or else the meetings immediately can sort of go off in lots of directions. So that plan sort of right to start has to be pretty specific, and you have to know what the goals are, and you have to have them pretty explicit, including in the contract to a CBO or a subgrantee. And then just echoing kind of what I'm sure you'll hear a lot, which is that often the most disadvantaged communities are also the ones who are under the most burden, but they're not necessarily the ones who have the best voice to get the resources. And so making sure that the resources that filter down really do go to the places that are most in need of it. So yeah, maybe I'll leave it there. There's a lot more, but let me give one more thing, which was about the possible the advantages to integrating with schools and also curricula locally, figuring out how to engage, how to actually engage with what curricula there is, and in a way that will be helpful to teachers who have existing requirements. So figuring out sort of on the grant side how to slot in what lessons you might get in a way that the school can just sort of naturally be engaged.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, so we can go to room 2.
Yeah, we got taken a little by surprise by the end of the rooms, which I think was my fault. So is there someone from room 2 who wants to share? And if not, I will. All right, hearing nothing, I guess it's on me. Like room 1, we had a really good wide-ranging discussion. So there are a lot of things. It's a little hard to summarize everything we talked about. But we talked a lot. One topic that came up was having well-documented open source code repository so that super users can actually use the data that's generated in the project. There was a lot of discussion around training materials and getting a good general education perspective, using the knowledge from CBOs. CBOs understand jurisdictional, how jurisdictions break up sort of enforcement mechanisms, and making sure that that is also understood by community members and using CBO knowledge to help with that. Also talked about using the data from airplanes as training material to get started on the training material. And then we also talked about, sorry, looking through the notes. areas of the state that maybe aren't covered by AOIs, and whether they will be targeted for observation in the future, but also making sure that the CBOs who are selected also include, and the communities that get the funding, that the materials that are generated are relevant to and available to all communities, and that those other communities are also included. We talked about focusing on CBOs who do climate or climate-related projects, as well as those who do environmental research. And making sure that CARB looks to other CARB programs for models, as well as CARB expertise from places like the EJAC. Does anyone want to add anything else from our discussion? Okay.
Thank you, Dorothy. Okay, so now to the last room, room 3.
Yeah, hi, this is May Petrosana. I was facilitating room 3. Wanted to thank Luke as my note taker. We had a great discussion. I'm just kind of going to pull, I know we had actually a discussion across a lot of different topics, but I'll just kind of pull out 3 kind of main or 3 points that I'll emphasize here. One was kind of some people brought up concerns about, or at least questioning the need for a third-party administrator, and concerns about kind of overhead costs related to that, and that would take away from money that could be going more to the CBOs. Number 2 would be that the community engagement plan and training materials should be developed and tailored for certain regions and communities in the state, rather than kind of a general statewide kind of deal. And then 2, a lot of CBOs do already have a lot of knowledge about the issues there, but they do want more support and resources on enforcement and emergency responses. So those are some things that I noted from our room. I know there are a lot of other points as well that I'm missing, but I'll pause for a few seconds in case anybody wants to add from room 3. All right. Yeah. Thanks again to our breakout room.
Thank you, May. Thank you all for sharing all the highlights. Dustin, can you please pull up the last slide before I pass it over to Jorn to close us off?
Do you see it?
Yes, thank you, Dustin.
Yeah, so Valerie, is this finishing up the workshop at this time?
Yes.
All right, great. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Jorn Herner. I'm the branch chief that oversees this program. Absolutely thrilled to have gotten this project this far. It rests on a good decade of research into remote sensing and methane plumes and a lot of other things. And it has grown in scope in many different ways. And one of the ways, of course, is that it's very clear that we need some community engagement in this project. And so I really thank you all for spending 2 hours with us today in the evening on a Thursday to start this conversation on how to do this best and how to get this grant solicitation out. I'd like to think that today was the beginning of a conversation and not the end of it, just because the workshop is over. If you have other ideas you'd like to share, you can always reach us via email, and the email is on here. If you would like follow-up meetings to go into additional detail, or just as another way to provide additional comment, we're open to that as well. And again, you can reach us through this CalSMP email that's on the screen. So with that, I'll say again, thank you so much for participating. CARB staff learned a lot. We'll go back and start work on the solicitation. And have a great evening. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.